Live from the City of Angels here on the Thursday evening box office preview show. You're watching Midnight Movie Talk. Thanks for being here as we get ready to talk about Abigail opening wide here tonight, along with that Henry Cavill movie. But I'm not a Guy Ritchie fan, so I really don't have much to say about that. We'll talk about it Sunday. I'm sure I'll catch up with this weekend. Also want to talk about the possible Sony purchase of Paramount and why that would be a disaster for Hollywood. We cannot lose any more studios, and Quentin Tarantino not going to make The Movie Critic. I am crying. I was hoping to be part of that film in some way. At least a character runs through a scene, and you're like, that's Weber. He's yelling about a movie. But we have to talk about our big film this weekend. Did you guys see Ready or Not? I liked Ready or Not quite a bit. I mean, when you look at Samara Weaving in that film, what a performance. And that film is the real true first time that we had a chance to see Radio Silence, the two directors who've gone on to do Scream and Scream 6. And now they turn to Abigail, which has so much Ready or Not in it. We'll discuss momentarily. I'm going to give you a taste of the film, and then we'll discuss what works, what doesn't. Here comes Abigail on MMT. I'll show you a little of the trailer right now.
Please let me out. I'm scared.
Cut the shit. You're really good at pretending to be a little girl.
Thank you.
Quick question. Who's inside a cage right now?
Okay, there you go. You get the whole movie right there. She's a vampire, okay? So let's just talk about this film as truly a ripoff. And when I tell you this, you're all going to go, when you see this movie, if you bother seeing Abigail, as soon as I say what I'm going to say, you're all going to go, oh my God, Weber's 100% right. This is Vampire Die Hard. Let me explain. As we know, in Die Hard, the terrorists, the robbers, break into the building to take the cash, to steal the money and get out of there. And what happens? They run into Bruce Willis, and their best laid plans go to hell, and he picks them off one by one. In Abigail, you have five crooks that come together to abduct a 12-year-old girl and take her back to a location to make money, and it turns out she's not what they expected, Die Hard, and she proceeds to pick them off one by one. Weber did it. It's Die Hard with a vampire. My God. And it's so Ready or Not. I mean, listen, you go back, you look at that film. I remember the kills from that film. And when I say this, you'll be like, you're right. It's a complete ripoff of what they did in their first real big film. You look at when the vampires here kills or gets killed, you have an explosion of a body. Just like Ready or Not, right? Remember that? Whenever someone died in that, they just went boom, like total explosion of the body. You've got the same general feel. And the problem with this film is that nothing feels new or fresh. Like I said, when you look at it through the lens of a Vampire Die Hard / Ready or Not Redux, you're talking about something that we've seen so many times before. And there's only so much you can do to entertain me. And I think the other problem with this film, and there's a couple real big ones, is that it's overblown. There's too much going on. There's too many characters. They try to do too much at the end. And ultimately, that leads to this being really overlong. I mean, even at 145, 150, this feels much longer. It drags. It takes forever to go where it wants to go. It really needs to be sped up. This is a great example of film that needs to be put into a meat grinder and brought down, compressed into a tighter, just more entertaining vision of what they wanted to do with this. Again, you extract characters, get rid of a scene here or there. There's stuff, trust me, in this film that's filler that doesn't need to be there. I think the other issue I have with Abigail is the fact that I'm over Catherine Newton. I'm telling you, after watching Lisa Frankenstein, I had enough Catherine Newton to last me a lifetime. You guys know I hate Civil War. I hate Beau is Afraid. I hate Poor Things, and I loathe Lisa Frankenstein. It's what a mean-spirited film. Someone said it's Tim Burton. Yeah, if Tim Burton were totally like dark-hearted and evil, it's got no soul. I hate that fucking movie. So I'm tired of her. I need her to go away for a while. She's doing the same thing in Lisa Frankenstein. She's doing it here. And I'm like, enough. I get it. You're annoying. I need you to exit for a while. Just please leave us alone. Conversely, I can't get enough of Melissa Barrera. I mean, right? Do you guys see the eye emojis? I mean, come on. That was the only thing that kept me interested in Scream 6 was Melissa Barrera. You go back to In the Heights. I have a tweet about that. Melissa Barrera. I mean, that is right. So I can, jive with that as long as you want to do it. But at some point, it's still not enough. And ultimately, this is a 55% for me. It's not a terrible film. It's not something I'd recommend, especially have you seen, of course, Die Hard, have you seen Ready or Not? You really don't need to see Abigail. I mean, it's a gory film. And it does what you want. If you want to see the blood and the guts, you go to a horror film. It's not scary. I mean, it's 0% scary. And no one can tell you that this film is not scary. It's not particularly funny either. There's a Don Rickles joke that goes on. And you're like, it's not really good. The jokes don't really land. You got Angus Young in here, which is always, tragic to watch. A performer who's passed on. And you look at, James Gandolfini, and you go back and you look at Ray Liotta, and we see them, and you see him posthumously on the screen, you just go, man, that is, it's not the easiest thing. And they do have a note at the end of the film saying for Angus Young. And first time I really saw the kid, I think that he's kind of like an Eminem version. At least I guess he was, right? And I think that's one of the things from the film that, will stick with you. The fact that it's his last performance probably that we'll ever see. He might have had some small role in something, but I think this is it for him. And you look at the film, it's just something that I can't recommend. And I think that you need to just skip it. I mean, it's not the lowest grade. I imagine you guys, mileage is vary. No one's going to tell you this film's great. They're also not going to tell you exactly, right? Let's put her in more movies. I mean, let's literally, how many movies can we get Melissa Barrera in? And let's just take it the extra step. How many movies can we get Melissa Barrera in and have her like in a Sydney Sweeney role, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, Melissa, don't think that you're above that. We don't have a problem with you in a bikini. No, Weber's out of control. Oh, whatever. Screw you guys. I'll do what I want. It's creepy. I don't care. I don't care anymore. I'm telling you, she's definitely hot, right? 100%. She just is. Yeah. Byron, I didn't say I hate this film. I didn't say I hated it. I hated the other films. I didn't hate this film. It's just not great. It's just not great. Exactly. Listen, there's elements here that you can work with, but ultimately the film just isn't something that you're ever going to come out of and say, my God, you've got to go see Abigail. You've got to go watch Ready or Not. And I assume since you all are here, you know that film. You're familiar with it, 2019. I came out of that and I'm like, these directors. Remember, I talked to them at the Searchlight party that year, that Christmas. They showed up and I went up to profess my love for Ready or Not. I mean, that film, you got the class warfare going on, Samara Weaving, just bonkers, the violence. But you go back and watch Ready or Not, and then you watch Abigail, you're gonna be like, this is so much borrowed from that film. I know they didn't write this one, but the feel of it, the tone of it, and go back to, like I said, Vampire, Die Hard. You go back to Ready or Not, they're not prepared for this girl, this Samara Weaving, who's going to turn the tables on them, right? You don't know what you're dealing with. And that's what happens in this film. You don't know what you're dealing with, this 12-year-old ballerina, and how many times do they do that in this film? And then, she's a vampire and she's going to kill us all, right? You've seen the trailer. Trailers ruin films, right? And Universal shows you the whole movie. There's very little in the Abigail trailer, that initial one that we saw for months and months and months and months, that doesn't reveal everything about the film. There's a couple of swerves at the end, but not enough to say this is a different movie. Of course, they wouldn't show you every little twist and turn on the way out, but the fact that we already know she's a vampire. Imagine if you had this as a Neon movie. Maybe there's some way that they cut it because they're very smart with their trailers, that they make it so you don't know what's going to happen. The problem is you already know what's happening the whole way through this film, and then all of a sudden you get to it, and it's like, where's the surprise, right? You just don't see it. My mouse went flying. That's what I get for getting fired up about films. All right, let's go to a couple more, and I'm going to talk about Sony and Paramount. It's the last thing that we need. I don't think it is it technically yes, I think she's technically Dracula's daughter by the end. At that point, I had pretty much checked out of this film. All right, we'll continue. More comments coming up, but I do want to get to this story. It is very big. That's why I'm glad we're doing a stream here tonight. We're looking at Sony possibly getting in on a bid with this venture capitalist group, I believe, right? Apollo. They want to buy Paramount. Now, why is that problematic? We just talked about a film, Ready or Not, from Searchlight Pictures, which used to be under the 20th Century Fox banner. If you remember, back in 2019, I believe that was the year it closed, Disney purchased Fox, and we lost a studio because it got swallowed up by Disney. Now, yes, they're still over there in West LA off of Pico, but they don't churn out nearly the product they used to, and it's all under the Disney umbrella, and now it's just 20th Century Studios. We can't lose another studio. Why? Because when you lose studios, we lost Fox. When you lose, if we lose a Paramount, you're losing an outlet to produce films, and as such, we don't want to see filmmakers not have more places to go. As much as I hate Beau is Afraid, and yes, Byron, I hate it, I still think that we should allow filmmakers to give us a vision, just not at that price tag. That was the problem with Beau is Afraid. It's not the film, it's the $35 million. You can't spend $35 million on that completely inaccessible film. You can give him $5, $6, $7 million, and then it would have turned a profit. You can't make that film at 35. So it's not about saying no to all these films. It's about saying yes to a lot of them, but at the right budget. Again, you talk about a film that comes in at a $50, $100, $200 million. Think how many small little indie films you can make off of a $100 million film. Let's say $5 million a film, 20 films right there. Look at all the films that I recommend this year. You look at a Femme, you look at a Sasquatch Sunset, you look at Asphalt City. Those are all small independent films, right? From distributors that are not large. Bleecker Street, Vertical, and Femme was, I think, Utopia. You know, these are tiny little films, but yet they're the best of the year so far. We're very early in the year. We need those kind of films, and we need more outlets for them to be produced, and Paramount has at least shown some ability to give us some films. You gave us a Smile, right? You look at their ability to pick that up. Parker Finn, right? That's the name, the director. You know, that shows obviously an ability to recognize this kid's talent. And I think Warner Brothers picked up his next film. And Smile 2 is going to go Paramount. We can't lose studios. We need as many outlets as possible, because if we start losing more studios, as we saw with Fox, there's just one less place that you can shop something that may turn out to be great. Not Beau is Afraid, not Poor Things, something that's truly great, right? Something that deserves to be made. There are a lot of things like that. You just have to have enough places to make it happen. Hypnotic, $65 million. Exactly. Man, listen, let Rodriguez make his film, not at 65. I mean, looking at that script, I'd be like, you get 10. And that's at most with Ben Affleck. Even Affleck, 10, 11 million, not 65. It bankrupted Solstice Studios. You can't make these decisions. You've got to know where the money is spent and where it is judiciously spent versus thrown into the trash. And a lot of these studios don't know that. And I just hope we don't lose another studio. Let's talk about Tarantino. This stream's going to be pretty tight tonight, like a half hour max. Might even be tighter than that. Just a fair warning. So get in your comments as much as you can, and then I'll get to as many as I can before I go. Let's talk about Tarantino. He's got, of course, was going to make The Movie Critic. Now it's not going to happen. So when you look at that film, it's going to be Brad Pitt, I believe an extension of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right? He's going to be a porno. If he wasn't the exact same character, it was going to be a very similar character, what Brad Pitt played in Hollywood. and you look at a porno reviewer. So it wasn't going to be the true movie critic. Like we were going to get a Siskel Ebert kind of thing. But when you look at Tarantino, he wants to make only 10 films. And I think THR had a really good article today talking about how that limits what you're able to do if you're going to cut it off at 10. How many directors, if you would have said stop at 10, we wouldn't have gotten great films later, a Scorsese. We wouldn't have gotten some films because they said we're done at 10. And I think that's the problem Tarantino has, is that now he's boxed himself in saying, I'm only going to make 10 films, and he wants to make sure that 10th one is, if not his best, one of his top 3. And maybe he thought The Movie Critic just wasn't as slight. It's just not, doesn't have enough weight to it to recommend making for his final film. So now he's going to go back and reformulate whatever's coming next. I mean, I would love to see a Tarantino weird 70s porno movie reviewer movie, but I think if we're going to only get 10, I'd rather have another Hollywood. I'd rather have another anything. I mean, you go back and you look at, I mean, for me, obviously Inglourious Bastards, when you look at, what was the, God, I'm literally forgetting the name of the slave movie. God, I think that might be one of my favorites for sure when you look at his, filmography. But I think that's the problem that he's running up against here, is that he is now like, oh, I have to make 10 films. Why did you say that? We've seen so many directors say, we're done, I'm retiring, and then they come back. And same thing with like pop stars. Last tour ever for the Rolling Stones like 30 years ago, and then they're back on the road. It's a gimmick. And so maybe he should just pretend he never said that and go make another film. Quentin's only like, is he in his late 50s? I don't think he's even 60. He has at least 2 good more, films in him. Let's just say if he makes one every 4 years, because Hollywood was 2019. So you're looking at 5 years now without a film. I understand and I will say this, I appreciate someone who takes their time to come up with whatever the next thing is, rather than just jamming all this shit together and one after the other. Because when you cram out too much product, then everything becomes, I think, diluted, right? It's very hard to crank out material that's going to be considered great over and over, year in, year out. That's almost impossible. You have to, I'd rather someone disappear for 3 years. You look at a Todd Field. Look at Todd. How long did he disappear from children, right? From little children. What the hell is that name of that movie? 2006, right? And you look at Tar. You go back and you look at that. You're talking about, what was the time frame on that? 15 plus years, right? So maybe it takes more time for you to write something that is great. And in the case of Tar, we saw that when you look at what he did over that time to create the masterpiece that he did in Tar. If that's what it takes, then do it. Take as much time as you want. There's no rush. Brad Pitt is Quentin Tarantino, the same as De Niro is to Martin Scorsese. Yeah, and listen, if you're a director, I mean, think about it. And you want to throw another one in there. We talked about it the other night. You look at a Ryan Coogler and a Michael B. Jordan. Directors who work with talent, and they get the best out of each other because they're comfortable working with one another, right? I know we did a short-lived Siskel and Ebert show, myself and of course, Menzel. The reason that show was good, and I'd still would love doing it, I just want to do it in person. I don't want to do it on the Zoom thing. We can do it. We can certainly have discussion with Menzel. But that show was awesome because we were able to be in the same space. I think it's very important, like Siskel and Ebert. But you look at what that show, for me, what made it fun is that, we get along. We understood each other. And so I wouldn't want to get in there with a critic that I absolutely hated, although I understand Siskel and Ebert did not like one another. But they still had the ability to work off one another. And I think that it's very important, and you look at a director with a star. If you're a director, the last thing you want is somebody in your film that can't handle what you're asking them to do. If you say, I need you to do this, they do it. You don't have to worry about it. Like tomorrow we have a shoot with this scene. I've got my boy. I don't have to worry about it because this person, if you're talking about a Coogler and a Jordan, he's like, Jordan's got this. Jordan's a badass. I don't have to worry about it. I'm going to go to bed tonight. And that's so important in everything that you're working in simpatico with, especially in the entertainment industry. You've got all these different personalities on set. You better hope that there isn't some kind of clash, as we saw with Rebecca Ferguson saying that Star said, got in her face and said all this shitty stuff to her because he couldn't, whoever that was, whether it was, I mean, we know we've narrowed it down between 3 different guys. Actually, I forgot to throw Fassbender in there. So we've got Gyllenhaal, Fassbender, and what's his ass from Paddington, Hugh Grant. Those are the three. But look, when you have problems on the set, then it's going to come through in the film because the chemistry is not going to be there. And then maybe the performer doesn't even want to give you a good performance. They hate the director. Go back and look at Entourage. Remember when Vinny had the issue with the director? He was like, that was amazing. Because that shit happens all the time out here. You know, you're going to butt heads. There's some big egos out here that they sometimes can't just get past that and do the work. So ultimately, you have to be able to have a good relationship with who you're working with if you hope to get the best material out of both of you, whether that be directing, acting, producing, whatever the skill may be. Quentin Tarantino is retiring because he had to write all his own scripts, unlike, say, Spielberg. Yeah, listen, we said that, talk so often about how directors and writers aren't always great at both. You could be a great director, a great writer. Rarely are you great at both. Tarantino is. He's one. There's not a whole lot. You know, Scorsese has written the majority of his scripts, not all. So when you look at, you know, director of who writes everything, it's Tarantino. That takes a lot of energy, man, to write it and then direct it. Think about that. If you're directing and you know how to direct and someone hands you a script, okay, look at Fincher, look at Social Network. He's got Sorkin writing it, right? He didn't have to write Social Network. He just had to direct the shit out of it. It's a best film of the 2000s, one of the best films of all time, because you had two people sharing the load of creativity, the writing and the directing. Those are, you know, to be able to do both those things and do them both at an elite plus level, very rare. And that's why we talk about in Tarantino, he's probably burnt, man. After doing a movie, I'd be like, I'm taking a break. He doesn't need the money. He's married. He has a kid now, right? I assume they've been married for years now. Dude doesn't have to work again in his life. So unless he feels it, why is he going to do it? Why would you go in? Like, we talk about winning the lottery all the time. If I all of a sudden won Powerball and I had $400 million in the bank, I might do the show, but it wouldn't be often. It would just definitely be on Sunday night, only Sunday night. And I'd be like, some nights, like, I don't want to, I'm going to go spend some of my 200 million. Guys, I love you all. Goodbye. But, you know, at the end of the day, if you don't have that motivating factor, and no one's suggesting that we're making 200 million on this stream, trust me on that you don't have maybe the same fire you did when you were younger. A Tarantino in his 20s and 30s had much more fire and gumption than he does now in his, I guess, almost 60s. I would guess, I don't know, someone tell me without me having to Google, because I have to keep talking. That's all I do. I don't ever take a break. I'm going to guess he's 58, maybe 59. I'm going to go 58 and a half. So someone tell me if I'm close. 58 and a half. Social Network's perfect. It's a masterpiece. You know, Tar's a masterpiece. There are not masterpieces every year. Tar just happened to be one. It's the most recent masterpiece. I don't think Oppenheimer's a masterpiece. The screenplay is not a masterpiece. The filmmaking, yes, close, very, but it's not a masterpiece. You know, I think for me, if you look at Nolan's best film, for me, it's Interstellar, and I can't wait for it to come back in IMAX. And the reason I always give for that is because of the emotion. You know, you've got the father-daughter relationship over time. Listen, it's brutalizing. At the end of that film, when you've got him, you know, at the same age and she's now getting on her deathbed, you're like, damn. Because that kind of stuff, I always talk about this, whenever you go through the sad passage of time and you look at that, you know, go back to a ghost story for me. Whenever you go through a lens of like time flying by really quick, there's something extreme for me, I imagine, hopefully for you as well, very emotional, because you realize that life is fleeting. Life is about moments, and they're there and they're gone. And I think whenever we get a chance to look at that and almost fast forward, you just go, whoa, remember him, McConaughey, looking at the video of his kids and they're now older and he's just like bawling, right? I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's that sad passage of time. It's bittersweet. And I think that ultimately, you know, if I were to give you any advice, remember, not that I ever have not given you advice, remember that everything is in the moment. cherish it as you are there, and then it's time to not live in the past, to continue pushing forward. The more you live in the past, I think the more trouble you're going to have even proceeding to the next day. I try to just focus on now, right? This stream, I'm not thinking about Civil War, which by the way is going to drop hard this weekend. I'm not thinking about Poor Things, Beau's Afraid, not thinking about last Sunday's stream. You're only worried about this moment right now. I think the more that you get yourself in whatever moment you're in at that very moment, then you're going to be more successful in life. I've watched Interstellar wormhole sequence. Listen, I saw it in 70 millimeter just last year down in Beverly Hills. I drove down there on a Sunday to watch it, and I had the same emotional experience. I assume I'll have the same one when I see it in IMAX 70 millimeter, and I'll definitely be going over to Universal to see that, like I saw Tenet in 70 millimeter IMAX. I can't wait. I mean, listen, it's his best film. And again, it's because of the emotional weight. It's that. Are there issues with the film? Yeah. I mean, I agree. Some of it's convoluted. Certainly the dialogue's buried underneath a lot of the score. And remember, he started doing that with The Dark Knight Rises. I remember sitting in The Dark Knight Rises, and I was sitting in Boston. Ken Murray, I don't know if he's here tonight. Love Kenny. He's on Twitter. Follow him. I was sitting there, and I'm like, what the? I can't hear shit. Is Batman talking? Why is the score so loud? I thought it was the theater. No, that's when he started to experiment. And then he bled it right into Interstellar, and he really buried it. I think the achievement, and I called this after watching Tenet did too, when you look at the dialogue in Oppenheimer, he said, we're not going to do it this time. He kept the dialogue up. I don't know what he was doing. I mean, I'm sure Nolan, he's going to tell you it didn't work. And Christopher knows that. If we had Nolan on the stream right now, I'd say, hey, listen, I know what you're trying to do with Interstellar. Dark Knight Rises, certainly a little bit in there. And with Tenet, you can't do that. It doesn't work. I get the concept, the execution, and the result not working. And he figured it out for Oppenheimer. Imagine if he didn't. If he buried all the Oppenheimer dialogue, you'd be like, geez, I can't. I don't even know what. I mean, but that's one of the problems. That's Interstellar's problem. He's trying to do all this convoluted physics and math shit, and you can't even hear it. So, I mean, now you couldn't even, listen, you couldn't understand it if you could hear it. So if you can't hear it, then you're really in trouble. I think Interstellar is the best score of all time. It's one of them for sure. 100%. 100%. Batman Begins greater than The Dark Knight. I'm not going to go with that. I think they're all great films, but I think Dark Knight is the best. I really think Dark Knight Rises is underappreciated. It's definitely too long. I mean, so is The Dark Knight's long as hell. It's almost 3 hours. At the end of the day, Nolan as a filmmaker is never going to bore you, right? So you're going to get a true cinematic experience with Christopher Nolan. So even if the film is truly a disaster, and Tenet's not a disaster. Tenet's not a great film. Tenet is made great by Nolan's filmmaking and by Ludwig's score. It's weird. It's not a screenplay movie, right? It is a experience. It is the filmmaking. It is the score. It is the sensory experience of that film. So you're always going to get something good out of Nolan when it comes to that situation. So yeah, I mean, any of the Batman films are going to be a winner for me. All right, guys, I think I'm going to call it a night. It's a tight stream tonight. We'll do a longer one on Sunday. I want to talk about Sydney Sweeney getting called a terrible actress by that producer. Wow. I'm telling you, that's crazy. And we'll discuss that on Sunday. It's turning into now Sydney Sweeney Sundays on MMT. I don't know how it works. That's kind of what our thing is. If Melissa Barrera decides to make something, becomes bigger, then we will turn it into the Barrera and Sweeney show. Just do a stream for like 20 minutes every week talking about the latest in Sydney Sweeney and Melissa Barrera news. That's how niche this channel is and will forever be. Guys, Always a pleasure. I'm back here on Sunday, breaking box office in the morning. The Sunday evening spectacular Sunday night. I want to take a few days, chill out, maybe see the Guy Ritchie movie, maybe not, whatever. Civil War's going down at least 55. I'm going to call it maybe 60 or higher percent. Bad cinema score. That film's in trouble. I think Abigail gets to maybe 20 if it's lucky. I got a 15 to 20. If it pushes past that, it's a win for Universal. Either way, wasn't a huge budget. And horror always is profitable, almost universally profitable, and probably will be again this weekend with Abigail. We'll talk about it Sunday morning. Until then, live from LA. Peace. See you next time. I'm out if I can get the stream done.